Satish and Apurva, if you could just mute your audios, please.
So, Apurva, let's wait for 1 more minute because participants are still joining, and then we can start. think we can start now.
A very warm good afternoon to everyone who has joined us. And on behalf of United States Agency for International Development, or as we call it USAID, I'm very delighted to welcome you all to this new episode of the South Asia Energy Series. We've had the first episode last month, and this particular episode, as we may call it, is focused all around electric vehicles. This South Asia Energy Series is a part of USAID's Asia Edge initiative, which is for particularly knowledge exchange as well as information exchange in the South Asia region, but even across in the globe. And this particular episode, which is focused around accelerating EV charging in South Asia, will be conducted in two parts, one that we are having today and one we will have in April later. In fact, today's webinar is brought to you by USAID's South Asia Regional Energy Hub, or SARE as we call it, which is in collaboration with some of other USAID's programs like Smart Power for Advancing Reliability and Connectivity, or SPARC, as well as Alliance for Energy Efficient Economy, or AEEE. SPARC, so SARE is basically USAID's regional hub under the Asia Edge initiatives, which is a knowledge sharing platform and which is primarily responsible for conducting such dialogues and cross learnings within the South Asia region. And this knowledge series is part of that effort. SPARC is USAID's 3-year bilateral assistance program with the Ministry of Power, which is aimed at modernizing distribution utilities and is being implemented by KPMG in India. And electric vehicles is part of this program as well. AEEE, as most of you may be knowing, is one of the leading civil society organizations in India that works on policy advocacy and awareness on energy productivity with a not-for-profit motive. And we're happy to say that in some ways, AEEE, we have a long-standing collaboration with them. USAID, in fact, seeded this whole concept and was one of the contributors to setting up AEEE. So we are very happy to kind of reinvigorate this collaboration. We will also cover critical issues that stakeholders face related to the deployment of charging infrastructure, including the identification of locations of public charging infrastructure, how do we select the charging infrastructure, the business models, and the pricing strategy, and so on. In fact, in today's webinar, SPARC and AEEE both will share their learnings. SPARC particularly will share their experience from the design and implementation of India's largest electric vehicle charging deployment story in partnership with Energy Efficiency Services Limited in New Delhi. And AEEE will share their learnings from the dedicated research on electric vehicles, particularly related to EV charging technologies. The second part of this episode will be organized, as I said, in April, and will cover some financial analysis and business model of EV charging infrastructure. This series on EVs will leverage the research and implementation experience in India for the benefit of the region as a whole, sharing of implementation best practices, key learnings among the South Asian nation is very, very critical for accelerated deployment of e-mobility ecosystem in the region. I'm very excited to welcome our participants from across the globe, particularly from our neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka. I suppose we have folks from Singapore, as well as from US who have joined. So welcome to all of you. I hope that today you will find these discussions very practical in their approach, and they will help you in as you kind of embark on your electric vehicles journey. With that, I would just like to share one or two slides with you, just to give you a very brief glimpse of the electric vehicles work that USAID has been supporting through the SPARC program. Pramod, can you just present the slides, please? So as we all understand, EV adoption is rapidly increasing globally. The number of EVs have increased by close to 700 times in the last decade or so. And this is primarily driven by decreasing cost of lithium batteries and a strong policy push from governments across the globe. The policy push can be classified, if you may say so, in three broad measures. One is incentivizing the purchase of electric vehicles through targeted incentives and policy measures. Second is matching the demand on the supply side through investments in R&D, manufacturing facilities. And third is the creation of the charging infrastructure. In fact, Government of India has taken a host of measures in this regard. Next slide. Next slide, please. In fact, we are very proud of our partnership with ESL, and now even as we speak, it is CESL, the subsidiary of ESL, which has taken over the e-mobility work. And ESL, along with CESL, has been anchoring the development of e-mobility ecosystem in India. In fact, through its demand aggregation model, ESL has deployed EVs across government departments, both at the federal as well as the state levels. And probably you will hear more about it as in the presentations later on. But to allay the range anxiety fears of consumers, it was very critical to upscale the deployment of public charging stations in the country. And this is where USAID Spark program partnered with ESL to how to accelerate this charging infrastructure within the country. And there are a host of initiatives that have been taken by Spark in this regard. Just the next slide. I won't go into the entire details of this, probably Spark team will cover this, but we've been working almost on all aspects of the EV ecosystem in terms of policy and regulation support to the states, developing business model, feasibility studies, location assessment methodologies, then channelizing the funding to accelerate EV charging infrastructure, facilitating partnerships with a variety of stakeholders, including cab aggregators, the OEMs, distribution utilities, and of course the scale up through variety of tools, scale up through DISCOMs and other entities, and so on, as well as capacity building of the team itself as they kind of roll it out with and throughout the country. So with that, I would like to now sort of put in some housekeeping rules for this whole webinar. Just for your information, this webinar is recorded. We request all the speakers to please be on mute and switch off the camera if you're not speaking, and please adhere to the allocated time. That's a request to the speakers. Audience can put their general comments in the chat box, but the specific questions can be put in the question and answer window. And all the webinar recordings and presentations and the links to useful resources, it will be made available with the proceedings within a week of this webinar. So with that, I would like to now introduce our first speaker, Satish Kumar, President and Executive Director of AEEE. Dr. Satish Kumar serves as the President and Executive Director of Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, AEEE, and he's really led the transformation of AEEE into a leading think tank and industry platform through his excellent leadership, fundraising, and collaboration. But he has also been a scientist at US National Lab, Lord LBNL. He has also been an energy efficiency ambassador at Schneider Electric, India. He also was leading as a chief of party, a USAID bilateral program on energy efficiency, ECO3. And he has a very distinguished career as well as educational background. I will not go into the details. And over to you, Satish. We look forward to you to give us a good context.
Thank you, Apurva. I hope I am audible.
Yes.
Okay, so it's great to be here. And first of all, my sincere thanks and gratitude to the South Asia Regional Energy Hub and USAID. And Apurva, as you mentioned, AEEE is a USAID creation. So I think it's doubly sweet to be participating on this USAID event. I'm going to be talking about three things in the next 5 minutes or so that I have, and realizing that most of the details are going to be covered by the two presentations given by KPMG and AEEE. So first of all, I think it's really an exciting time for the e-mobility space. And India is also showing great leadership at multiple fronts, I think, in the policy setting space, in the technology space, as well as, I think, in terms of the business model and the infrastructure that is going to be needed. And one of a little bit of a minor setbacks or hitch has been the COVID-19, because there was a lot of thrust on public buses, and everybody was thinking that those are going to be the first adopters of EV technology. And with the pandemic hitting, a lot of concerns came about traveling in public transportation and others. But I think that with the vaccine coming in, and with the the numbers going down, we will probably be back on that. But I just want to take this opportunity to also talk about two other pieces that are moving simultaneously. And I'm sure that I think India will start to see some of that very soon. In fact, one of the things is already happening. So to make, I think, EV as a technology truly transformational, we know that clean energy transition is important. And India being one of the leaders in the renewable energy space, I think is already well on its way to make EV as a really transformative technology, which is not just going to transform the mobility space, but also from an energy security perspective and climate change commitments that India is giving. The second piece that I want to highlight is the work that is happening in the autonomous vehicle. So knowing, I think, and we all are sometimes miserable and frustrated about what we see on the roads of India. So I'm definitely looking forward to our cities where autonomous vehicles, rule-based traffic, and those things will combine with clean energy transition and EV technology to truly transform, I think, our transportation infrastructure. And these three, in my opinion, are going to play out in parallel. And maybe I think in 10 years' time, I think what we will see on the road is going to be very, very different from what we see. Just changing gears, I want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the work that AEEE has done. Chandana Sasidharan, she will be making a presentation on the EV charging technology work that AEEE has done. Pretty significant work looking at buses, looking at two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and looking at four-wheelers and fleets. So that will be covered by Chandana. I want to take just a few more minutes to talk about another initiative, which is called the Green Vehicle Rating Initiative, which is in fact focused on two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And the reason we have done that is that probably people are aware that in terms of the total EV sales in India in FY20, 97.5% of the share has been of electric two-wheelers. And India is a country of two-wheelers, we all know that. So are there reliable information that not just looks at the fuel efficiency and this whole concept of kitna deti hai, but also look at what is the environmental impact in terms of the damage caused from health perspective, from carbon, from a carbon cost perspective. And this is a work that we started some years ago. First times we did not look at EV two-wheelers and three-wheelers, but this is going to get launched in the next month or so. And we already have a portal. I'll write the link to that portal in the chat box, I think, during the course of this program. And the last thing that I would say is that we are also, because AEEE works on the demand side, and we are looking at the impact of electric vehicles on our grid. And knowing that demand management is going to become a very, very important topic. So that area is also pretty important in our opinion. So how do you use EVs? Do you want to use the batteries as a resource, as an energy storage resource, or do you want to use smart charging solutions to manage your demand load in a manner where it doesn't become prohibitively expensive because you are charging in the. So I think that is all that I have to say. And once again, thank you, USAID and the SARE program for giving us an opportunity. Back to you, Pramod.
Thank you, Satish. Thank you for laying out specific ideas that you have on the EVs and what are the key issues that you think are very important for accelerating the EV ecosystem within the country. With that, I would like to invite the first speaker, Rajesh Singla, who's a key member of the USAID Spark program and belongs to KPMG. And he has been instrumental in working with ESL very closely in the design and deployment of the public charging infrastructure. Rajesh will present on the location assessment for establishing public charging stations for electric vehicles. Over to you, Rajesh.
Rajesh, you need to unmute.
Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes,
You
Rajesh.
are.
Yeah. So I would be presenting on the location assessment part for accelerating EV charging in South Asia. The overall slide has been divided into 4 parts, giving an overview of USAID Spark program, the evolving ecosystem for EVs, deployment of public charging stations in India, what was our experiences, and what are the potential role of government agencies in rolling out EV charging stations. As already mentioned, USAID Spark program is a 3-year bilateral program aimed at supporting modernization of distribution sector. Power distribution. It has been partnered with several organizations, including Ministry of Power and Energy Efficiency Services Limited. As part of this program, one of the key component of the program was to design and deployment of public charging stations for electrical vehicles. As mentioned earlier, the learnings from this whole exercise was captured under a practitioner's guide, which was released sometime back in January 2020, the link of which would be shared on the chat box. Now, as Apurva already mentioned that in the last decade, the number of EVs have increased to roughly around 10 million from mere 15,000 in 2010, which has been pushed mainly by different government policies. In Asia, what also we see that a number of countries have set aggressive targets for EV adoption. For instance, Bangladesh is under drafting stage for an auto industry policy, the target of 15% by 2030. Bhutan has targeted 70% reduction in fuel import. Nepal, Singapore, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and all have set very aggressive targets for EV adoption. These all policies have also led corporates to come up with their own net zero emission targets. And EVs are increasingly becoming an important part to achieve the goal for net zero. Now, overall, the EV ecosystem has 3 main challenges, or you can say 3 main key barriers. One is the high upfront cost, which is being met by the different demand incentives being rolled out by different policies. There are limited number of EV models. Considering push from everyone, each and every government on the reducing its emissions, number of OEMs are now launching new and new models in the market. And third is the lack of public charging infrastructure, which we will cover today. Now, USAID Spark program helped ESL in deployment of a scalable business models. Under this, we helped ESL in designing the business model for installation of charging infrastructure, implementation of that business model, and development of a location assessment framework. Post that, we also helped them analyze data coming out of the chargers for further business insights, and then help them scale up, develop tools and templates for scale up of EV charging infrastructure. As of now, around 220 chargers are already installed in India, with more than 1,000 chargers already procured for installation across India. Now, before we go ahead with the business model design, it's important that we understand what are the key cost components in the EV charging stations. Generally, it's just believed that it's the cost of power only which should be charged to users. But apart from that, we have capital cost, which includes not only chargers but other auxiliary equipments as well, and operational costs, which may include annual maintenance of the chargers or certain payment gateway charges, etc. Now, considering these are initial few years of EV adoption, it is important that all the charging infrastructure is placed in such a way that the utilization of the charging infrastructure is high, to ensure that affordability of the infrastructure is there. So, when we started this exercise, there were around 5 different types of charger available in the market: CCS, CHAdeMO, Type 2, and India has its own local standards, Bharat AC 001 and Bharat DC 001. At the time of starting this exercise, most of the cars were available in the Indian market were compatible with only Bharat DC 001 and AC 001 charger protocol. So initially, we started the exercise by deploying only Bharat DC 001. We didn't consider AC 001 because we see that the overall charging speed that is from the AC 001 is very low. It's only 5 kilometers for every 15 minutes of charging. While selecting a region for initial rollout, we selected New Delhi as the first city for the pilot, considering it has one of the highest penetration of vehicles in India. And in New Delhi, we selected New Delhi Municipal Corporation, NDMC, considering its high footfall, high traffic, and that NDMC is both power utility as well as municipal body, so there will be ease of coordination. How we came up with the NDMC, these details are covered in the latest part of the slides. For business model, ESL did a tie-up with local municipality, which is NDMC in Delhi. Local municipality provided the land and parking space for EVs, and for which ESL used to pay a land rental. Now, this land rental was not on the fixed terms, but on the energy terms, basically a kind of a revenue sharing mechanism, so that the initial upfront cost for the charge or fixed cost of the charging infrastructure can be reduced. This led to...
Rajesh, you have roughly 3 minutes, just to make you aware of the time, just to make you aware.
Sure. So this led to a win-win value proposition where the unique mechanism of land leasing from local municipality helped reduce the cost. ESL aggregated the demand from different players, led to a bulk procurement leading to better discovery of the prices. And with access to its low-cost financing, this all led to an affordable charging infrastructure for the end consumers. Now, coming to the location assessment, the key, since this was the first time rollout of charging infrastructure in the country, the key objective of the charging infrastructure was that the charging infrastructure should be accessible and affordable, and it should have a demonstration effect for the public so that they can buy more and more EVs. Now, there are 3 steps which we will cover going forward. In step 1, we started capturing the data to see where are the most of the public, where would be the most of the footfall of the people are there in the Delhi region. For that, we captured information on metro station, petrol pumps, railway stations, and parking areas. Wherever these points would be concentrated more, we expected that there would be more footfall, or the more cars would be visiting that particular area. So there is a high probability that EV will be there, would lead to higher utilization of the chargers. We plotted all these public POIs on QGIS software. Then, as per the Ministry of Power guidelines, we divided the whole city into a 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer grid, as guidelines suggested that there should be at least one charger in every 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer grid. All the POIs were then converted into a heat map, which are being reflected here. The white ones are areas where there are very few POIs. Then we started looking at areas. Once we mapped out, we started looking at where all these locations are there. So we found that NDMC and SDMC are the two municipality areas which cover most of the points. So considering NDMC is both power utility as well as land utility, we consider NDMC as the first pilot area for the installation of charging infrastructure. Once we are done with the secondary assessment, we started primary assessment to ensure that the charging infrastructure can be deployed in a short interval of time. We discussed various parameters that are required to be assessed for installation of chargers, for which we had a joint survey team, including members from Spark team, from ESL, and from NDMC, which was the land as well as the power utility. The 5 parameters that we identified was the availability of parking station, parking space, load availability, visibility of the site to the general public and accessibility of the site, footfall around the area should be higher, and the civil works required should be as minimum as possible so that the charges can be installed in a quick interval of time. Basis this, we prioritize the sites which require the minimum cost and the minimum interventions were categorized as priority 1. Then priority 2 sites were where minor intervention was there. Priority 3 was the sites where major interventions or major approvals from different authorities would be required. We surveyed around 150 locations, and the map shows the mapping of all the priority 1, 2, 3 sites. Of all these sites, around 70 chargers are already installed in the NDMC region. We then scaled this model to other cities of the country as well. For instance, we helped doing this assessment in Chennai, Jaipur, and Gurgaon. One of the key learnings from the location assessment that although it's assumed that the power load will be easily available, especially in the center of the city. But what we have found, that's not the case. In fact, while working in other countries also, for instance, in Nepal, we found that the heart of the city, the load is not that easily available. Even if the load is available, the augmentation of the infrastructure required may be a huge cost, may add to the huge cost. So although now we keep on seeing that the EV charging can be done within 5 minutes, there are technologies coming. But for installation of these very fast chargers in the center of the city may not be possible because getting load for more than 50 kilowatts is not an easy job. Then apart from load, there may be scenarios where civil works may lead to a lot of investment and as well as time consumption. For instance, in some of the sites, what we saw is we may need to bring a power line from the other side of the road, and the road is the arterial road of the Delhi. So there is no way that the power can be brought from the other side of the road. So some of those sites get cancelled then. Thirdly, land availability is a major issue. Governments needs to facilitate the installation of PCS for cohesive development of the whole network. Wherever the land is available, there are certain issues related to giving a right of way to EVs. So all those issues needs to be tackled. Coming to the role of government agencies, policymakers need to give a clear direction of EV adoption and charging infrastructure so that at least a private investor has clarity that how the EV scenario will change in the country. There is need to have a enabling framework for private investment. For instance, in India, the charging infrastructure activity has been delicensed. Anyone can invest in that. There are issues related to tax related issues, which also needs to be clarified as and when they emerge. For land related agencies, they need to ensure the right of way for EVs. Also, the long-term lease for EV charging infrastructure can be provided on different mechanism. One of the mechanism can be revenue sharing mechanisms. so that it doesn't add to the capital expenditure or operational expenditure of the charge point operator. Thirdly, distribution companies, at least for the initial few years, needs to provide electricity not more than at average cost of supply, so that the overall cost of charging infrastructure remains at the lower end. As the market matures, different pricing models emerge. For instance, time of day can be explored to ensure that EVs don't lead to a significant burden on the grid. Third, as I mentioned earlier, in different parts, especially in the heart of the city, the power infrastructure is not enough to provide such a huge load for the charging infrastructure. So some upgradation may be required. So maybe power distribution companies provide upgrades as and where required. So that's it from my side. Any questions I can happy to answer. Over to you, Purva.
Thank you, Rajesh, for laying down your efforts with ESL on deployment of EV charging infrastructure in the country. With that, I would now like to invite Chandana Sasidharan, Senior Research Associate at AEEE. Chandana works in the power utility electric mobility vertical of AEEE, and her research area is distributed energy resources, focusing on EVs, demand response, flexible loads, energy storage, and so on. Chandana has over 8 years of work experience with a competency in power system studies, data science, and energy modeling. She's worked earlier at Reliance Industries Limited, and even she has a very illustrious educational background as well. So Chandana, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I am going to share my screen so that you're able to see the presentation. So in about 30 minutes, I will walk you through what are the basics of selection of charging technologies for different electric vehicle segments. I'm from a AEEE. For the past 2 years, we have been dedicatedly trying to study the electric vehicle charging aspects. So we are going to be talking about buses, cars, as well as 2- and 3-wheelers today. And we will also try to see some global examples, and particularly we'll be focused on what did we learn when we studied the Indian market specifically. At AEEE, we have done dedicated research on EV charging. As you can see, we have 5 reports, 3 of them focused on buses, 4-wheelers, and 3-wheelers. And we have 2 reports which is focused on the vehicle to grid integration angle, as well as the EV charging tariff angle. As Satish explained, we are currently taking an initiative called as Green Vehicle Rating. Apart from that, we are also assisting in electrification of bus fleets in a Himalayan state. So quickly, if I were to categorize charging technologies based on the method of power transfer, this is the simplest that I can go. The first is a conductive option, wherein there is a wired connection that is charging the vehicle. This can be through AC or DC. The battery is DC, whereas the grid is AC. In case I'm connecting it to an AC charge point, as you can see on the right side of the screen, the vehicle needs to have an onboard charger. This charger could also be part of the cable in itself. That is another thing that we see when you look at 2- or 3-wheelers. It's pretty much like your laptop charger. On the other end, if I'm supplying DC to the vehicle, it implies that I have the ability to keep the charger outside the vehicle. And this pretty much helps me in some cases on considerations of weight as well as safety. On the other end, you can also transfer power wirelessly. That is one possibility that you have, as well as you can take the battery out of the vehicle and swap it. One of the most recognized classifications for charging is in levels and modes, the details of which are actually available in our report. And if you want to discuss more about that, we can do it in the end. But what we really need to realize is that since there is no standardization of grid or vehicles anywhere, there is no one universal standard for classifying all the charging technologies. I am going to use buses as an example to explain charging to you. One of the first things that we did when we went to study buses is to see how buses are being charged. It was surprising for us as well to see that buses can also be charged at AC. We did not expect that to happen because buses have huge batteries. What we found is that one particular bus manufacturer, this is Electra BYD, they're very popular in India as well as in global phase. They actually put AC chargers inside their bus. These are 240 kilowatt chargers, and they are quite good in charging their buses within a window of 4 hours. But what is the most popular method for charging a bus could easily be the DC plug-in charging on the other end. This is why the chargers are outside. You could have a basic charger, which is somewhere around a 50 kilowatt range, or you could have a 150 kilowatt charger. This 150 kilowatt charger could be used in such a way that it can quickly charge one bus under an hour or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. On the other end, the same charger could be used such that one 150 charger can charge 3 buses also. So this is a common way that we have seen how buses are being charged. And if you go to higher powers for buses, because buses have really huge batteries, so this gives us a possibility to do an opportunity charging. Now, plugging in very high power is a problem. Hence, you can think of 2 ways to actually supply high power to the bus. One is a continuous charging for a bus. In this case, there is a low battery capacity. This is pretty much like operating the bus on a tram systems. These are not very popular, but this does exist. On the other end, you could have these pantograph systems that are actually located at bus stops. This is a quick top up for a bus at a very high power. This could be anywhere from 150 to 650 kilowatt. This is something that will help you for a quick top up in case of a buses. It can have 2 configurations. One is wherein the charger is on top of the bus, and another configuration is in where the charger is actually, the pantograph is actually part of the charger itself. And this technology becomes relevant if you're planning for electric buses having ultra capacitors. That is a call that some of the Indian bus manufacturers are trying to take. Thirdly, for the global coverage, we also studied battery swapping and wireless charging cases as well. These are pilots that are happening globally. There are a lot of wireless charging pilots happening in US, UK, as well as other European countries, wherein they are trying to charge a bus when it is set as a bus stop. What we need to remember about wireless charging is that even though the power is transferred wirelessly, you will still need to have a charger on the board. And the example that I wanted to showcase here is in wherein a bus is actually traveling all over on the road and it is still being charged wirelessly. This is a pilot project that happened in Korea. This is a dynamic induction project wherein the bus never has to stop for charging. It can continuously charge through. On the other end, on battery swapping, we have a case that is happening in Ahmedabad in India as well. But this is because Ahmedabad has a bus rapid transit system, which is a very segmented transit system, which is supportive of adoption of a technology like battery swapping. And when you have a battery swapping system for a bus, as these batteries are quite heavier, you need a robotic mechanism to swap the batteries, as well as there needs to be a charging system for the battery as well. Now, what are the major things we need to look for if you are planning for bus charging? The first thing is that the buses can be charged at the depots. That is the best location to actually charge the bus, or it can also be charged at any immediate station on the way. How can you charge the buses is clear. Now your next problem is, when will you charge the bus? One way to look for it is like you are only charging your buses at night. In this case, you need larger batteries, which might require less amount of daytime charging that needs to happen, or you can actually charge the bus during the operative hours whenever an opportunity actually arises. This could be the case as we show below, post the completion of a trip, or you can actually charge at an intermediate station. If you are planning for a smaller battery for a bus, this implies you need frequent charging. So if you were to plan bus charging, you need to get your objectives correct. What is it that you want is that because of electrification, your route is actually not hampered. The transport in your route is actually not hampered, as well as you could also design it in a way that you are maximizing the utilization of the charging infrastructure you have for buses. One major point that I want to make here is that the route parameters, including the route length and what is the headway between two buses, all of these considerations become very critical when you're actually charging bus charging. Based on AAA study for Indian bus routes for intra-city transport, we recommend that if you are planning for most of the roads with a 200 kWh battery, you don't need to set up intermediate charging. This is for transport that you're doing within the city. This is a point that Rajesh also tried to make. Just to iterate it, some of our countries might have homegrown models for electric vehicle. This implies that they don't conform to the international standards. In India, we have such a case for a four-wheeler because we had our own electric Reva, and the Reva drivetrain led to development of a set of a vehicle, popular ones that we are seeing on roads right now. To satisfy the needs of this type of a vehicle, which operates at a lower voltage, which has a smaller battery pack, which cannot be charged as quickly as the international models, we had to develop our own standard called as a Bharat DC standard. We would not feel that the standard is redundant in case if you are planning for transformation of your ICE vehicles into electric vehicle models and a retrofit is going to happen. Possibly this standard and this vehicle technology might be still relevant at the 72 volt, even though it's a low voltage and a slower charging vehicle. On the other end, the faster charging stations, they are mostly conforming to the combined charging system standard. This is a call that manufacturer, it's actually up to manufacturers, though India has remained open as far as the standards are concerned. One major point here is that charging power will be determined on your battery capacity. So if one thing that we saw, even though the number of models in India are really less at this point, the Indian vehicles have lower battery capacity than the international models, wherein you have Teslas that can go as high as 80 kWh, or roughly the battery size is 50 kWh. The battery capacity for a country will depend on the average traveling distance as well as how cost sensitive the consumers are. So for a country like India or any country in South Asia where the average travel distance is going to be low, perhaps the battery capacity that we need to look at could be anywhere around 20 or 25. We might not need 40 kilowatt hour batteries. This implies that our charger power that we need to plan for will also change a lot. What kind of chargers do you see for vehicles? As you can see, the two chargers that are highlighted in boxes are the chargers that we developed based on our own standards that India has developed. This actually brings us to an important question that we need to talk about, that it is quite possible that the existing international standards might not really help us, even in the case of electric cars itself, wherein the international standards are well established. When I bring in two-wheeler and three-wheeler into the equation, it's a muddy water because the international standards don't really exist. But what we need to understand is, if I want to plan charging, there is a whole range of possibilities that I have, which starts from a basic 3 kilowatt industrial plug top, which was possible to use in India because the initial set of vehicles, they allowed industrial plug top as a connector that you could use. Going ahead, we started talking more about the type 2 connectors. The 7 kilowatt connector that you see here, which is in the magenta color, that actually conforms to a type 2 connector. Here also, you can see the interlinkages with battery capacity. If we are talking about the basic charging that you need to provide for a vehicle, if you are still dealing with 25 kilowatt hour batteries, you can have low power chargers that are possible to connect the batteries. Whereas if you're going ahead, you have 40 kilowatt hour plus vehicles, then you kind of need 7 kilowatt chargers, at least this is for the overnight home charging that you need to do. If you want to buy cars with bigger batteries, then definitely 7 kilowatt might not suffice. You might need to go further up to 11. This implies that you moved away from a single phase connection to a three-phase connection. Also, when I go to the upper end, I can have 25 to 50 or 150 kilowatt at the fast charging side. But remember this idea, if your battery capacity is only 25, you can still manage with 25 kilowatt capacity. Once you hit to a 50, definitely you need 50 kilowatt chargers. Whereas if you are planning for faster chargers, this could be charging stations at the end of highways or all, therein the 50 kilowatt might not suffice. You need to plan for further 150. But that is given that the vehicles are capable of charging at such fast rates. We need to remember that this technology will be expensive, and India has a specific climatic conditions wherein our summers are really warm, and this might be a hampering factor when we want to charge our vehicles faster. Another major point that we need to think of is how are you treating the charging problem? One way to treat the charging problem is like specifically in the way that you would treat a petrol pump. These are sites located at the side of a load, which operates pretty much like a regular fuel refilling station. This could be an all-electric station, or this could be a petrol pump doing retrofit with a charger. These kind of facilities, the kind of thought that is related to it is in and out as quick as possible. And the larger number of consumers they can service, they can actually, the more revenue that they make. On the other end, we also need to consider of the situations wherein an opportunity is arising that will avail charging. These are locations wherein your vehicle is actually parked, and in those places, it makes a lot of sense to provide charging. This could be parking lots that are managed anywhere in malls, hospitals, offices, anywhere else. This is a public parking space wherein the parking space is actually available. There is enough time to actually charge the vehicle. In these kind of two types of locations could be possible under this. One is a very well-planned location that is off the street. This could be a mall parking lot. There can also be on-street parking, which is not a very dedicated, demarcated area, but those kind of locations also exist. So when you're planning charging for those locations, one of our recommendation based on our analysis is that you provide basic AC charging solutions in this public parking and office spaces. Whereas when you're planning for an on-route charging kind of a location where the fast is the game, you plan for DC charging solutions for four-wheelers. I also wanted to bring this point that commercial fleets are going to be the biggest users for public charging facilities initially, rather than the private user where there is a chance to actually charge the vehicle at home. So we'll talk to different types of commercial fleet operators in India who are electrifying their fleets. This could be an on-demand cab fleet like Ola and Uber. This could also be a staff transport fleet like Lithium or BlueSmart. Every fleet has a distinct preference for every type of facility that they want to use. So if you look at the cab fleets, they prefer a little bit more on the captive charging, as well as I'm looking at the staff transport fleet. They might have an relatively equal preference of other options. So if you are going to be a charging service provider and your primary consumer is going to be commercial fleets, it makes a lot of sense to actually reach out and understand the preferences of this fleet operators before you make a decision on what kind of chargers do you want to install. And when I get into the story about the two-wheelers, e-rickshaws, e-autos, e-carts, and e-cargo, we think that the electric two and three-wheelers is a very simple problem to solve. Unfortunately, it is not an easy problem to solve because these are vehicles wherein there is not always an active cooling mechanism that might avail fast charging. And if the battery chemistry is not suited for tropical climatic conditions, charging it faster could actually be a problem. So when you look at electric two-wheeler models, you will see low speed and high speed vehicles, but not much different in terms of battery capacity. The range could definitely be different. But on the three-wheeler side, you have both passenger as well as logistic vehicles of distinct battery capacity. The e-rickshaw or e-car doesn't have regenerative braking facility, a slightly smaller battery, whereas you go to the autos or cargos, they have larger batteries. So if I take the entire segment, I'm talking about anything from a 1 kilowatt hour battery to, let's say, a 10 kilowatt hour battery. So typically I might need to think of chargers in the range of 10 kilowatt or so. But this is an interesting segment because one way for me to look at the charging is I'm charging the vehicle inside the vehicle itself. So you could use a portable EVSE. These are very popular. These are similar to laptop chargers to charge your vehicle. Or this could be programmable chargers as well, or you can actually have fixed EVSE unit. This is for something that India is developing a standard for DC charging for these vehicles, when the charger is actually outside the vehicle. This is one recommendation that I understand the IEC is also trying to go with. That is a leapfrog opportunity for India to undertake in manufacturing, and this could be also one opportunity that South Asia can also benefit from. On the other end, I know what you are looking forward in this session to understand is the battery swapping. This is wherein you remove the battery, and when I remove the battery, I can just charge the battery individually at my home or at any commercial location, just like I would charge any other battery. Or I can have solutions which are more centralized in nature, wherein I have a stack charger, wherein I can put in and replace batteries. That I'm talking about multiple number of batteries. What is the most critical point when we are going to plan for battery swapping? It is that batteries, even though they are detachable in nature, they enable swapping. We need to consider the weight of the battery pack as an important factor. And as you would know, the weight would depend on battery capacity and energy density. I want to make a point here that when we studied the batteries between electric two-wheelers and electric three-wheelers that are approved by the FAME scheme in India, we saw that electric three-wheeler batteries are heavier, not just because of the battery capacity, but also because the chemistry change, which makes them lesser in energy density than the two-wheeler battery. Typical two-wheeler battery chemistries are such that the weight is lesser. So when I'm talking about an electric two-wheeler, it's really, really easy to do the swapping because it's a 10 kg battery. A single person can easily lift that. Whereas when I'm talking about an e-rickshaw battery, it's heavier. It's not possible for a single person to lift it. So one of the things that you can do, as you can see in the assisted swapping arrangement that is done by Lithion Power, is to arrange another person at that swapping facility who can lift the battery for you. So this kind of mechanism is called as assisted swapping. And one kind of a recommendation that might really work here, especially if you go to goods carrier, this is going to be 50 kg battery. Sometimes you're talking about it's not easier to lift. So one logical thing that we can do is to split the battery into smaller packs. So if you have an electric two-wheeler, that's let's say 1.5 kWh pack. If you have an e-rickshaw, let's say it's a 2 into 1.5 kWh pack, which is easily liftable. And then maybe when you have an e-auto, you split it into 3, you have 3 packs instead of 1 pack. Therein you have still solved the weight problem that is associated with swapping. Here also, we wanted to make this point that even in electric two-wheeler fleets, there are passenger and commercial fleets of distinct operational patterns. A courier fleet's operational pattern in the two-wheeler and three-wheeler, there is a difference. A courier fleet's operational pattern in the two-wheeler and a food and grocery fleet's operational pattern in the two-wheeler in itself is different. The way a bike taxi fleet and a bike rental fleet actually operates is also different. You can find more details on these fleet operational patterns in our report. But this is a point that I wanted to make here is that when we ask the fleet operators what kind of charging or swapping do they prefer, this is the answer they gave us. So if you are operational with a two-wheeler fleet, you kind of have equal preference for charging and swapping. This is actually because at 2 kWh capacity or so, the vehicles have sufficient charge to actually travel the full distance through the day, and any kind of additional requirement that is going to come in, they can handle with both charging and swapping for a quick top up. So it works. Whereas when it gets to the three-wheeler fleets, it gets a little tricky. If you are talking about electric three-wheeler passenger fleets, they definitely prefer swapping because of the downtime consideration. Whereas when we get into the logistic fleet, we already saw that the weight is going to be a problem. Therein we see that they have a slightly more preference towards charging. And this is a case that is really relevant because of the operational pattern of the fleet. Now, if you see logistic fleet, they have a mid-time lull period wherein they have the chance and the opportunity and the time to actually do a quick top-up for their vehicles. That is why they can also survive with charging alone when I'm thinking about a logistic fleet operation with three-wheelers. So quickly walking you through the type of facilities that are available. So one kind of a facility can be a distributed EV charging or a swapping facility. These are very easy to set up because the power requirement is anywhere going to be 3.3 kilowatt or so, which is available practically anywhere. So you can tie up with a local owner. This could be a restaurant owner who has a parking space, or this could be like a kirana shop, as you can see, wherein he can also set up a fast swapping facility. Now, this gives us very interesting business opportunities where if you are planning to cater for the two-wheeler or three-wheeler fleets. In one case, it's very easy to set up. The power requirement is limited. If you are talking about a battery swapping facility, possibly you need to maintain a stock of spare batteries. Both of them are similar, but it's just that, you know, the charger is actually different in this distinct case. We can also have centralized facilities. So if I'm looking at a multiple EV charging facility, which you see on the right-hand side, the focus is that therein possibly you can use some advanced chargers which are program controlled as well. But what we need to understand is that the footprint requirement for such kind of facility is high. You need space to park all the vehicles. You might need to park space to put in your chargers that are there. Since the three-wheelers, there is no standardization right now. That is where, you know, you can have the basic plug. This is a point that you can see. The basic 16 ampere plug is actually used to charge a vehicle, whereas the charger in itself is a little bit advanced. In both the cases, if you have a stacked battery facility or a multiple EV charging facility, you will need a new electricity connection. But the battery stacking facility might have a great advantage here. The advantage is that the footprint that is required for it is actually quite less. So you only need parking space for one vehicle or two vehicles in this case, and you can set up your entire box in a half square meter area. Now, this kind of box can actually supply, this could be 3x5 or 5x5, any type of boxes. So you can actually charge up to 15 or 25 batteries at the same site. And this kind of systems can also work for two and three wheelers. One point that I do want to make here is on the importance of how adopting a multi-criteria decision-making tool while selecting a charging technology. This is something that AAA has endorsed in all our reports. We have said that if you are selecting charging technology, don't just make a technical choice. Weigh in both technical and economic factors. And this is a sample consideration that you are seeing, or analysis that is for the 4 options that you saw for 2 and 3 wheeler charging. Before you, we have considered everything from vehicle downtime to cost of space, cost of infrastructure, cost of electricity, how easy is it to get a connection, and how easily can you scale it. So this is based on our own analysis, and we are presenting. The idea is not to present our results, but more about to focus and push people to adopt the technology. If you were to visit our website, you will see these tools that would actually help you pick and choose between different charging technology options that are available for buses, 4-wheelers, as well as 2 and 3 wheelers. What are the key takeaways that we had when we did our analysis? The first major takeaway that we had was that we need meticulous planning for charging infrastructure, and you need to answer 3 questions. One is, where are you charging? Are you charging en route? Then you don't have, you might have treated like a common petrol pump problem. You need faster kind of charging infrastructure. You really don't have the ability of time. Whereas if you are actually charging inside a public parking space where you have excess of time, and this is an opportunity that you are charging, you're already parked, where I might as well charge. In that condition is wherein you can apply a lot of smart charging technologies there. In this case, we would really promote AC or DC charging, but at a slower rate. When we are talking about when do you charge the vehicles, one is an overnight consideration, particularly critical in the case of buses. If you are planning for an overnight charging only, regardless of type of vehicle, you might need larger batteries. Whereas when you need opportunity charging facilities, you need widespread charger availability everywhere. This is a good business opportunity that exists for a large set of people to become entrepreneurs. Whereas if I'm planning for a bus in this case, I need high power chargers. That is a consideration that I have to make. And then you already saw how you can charge a vehicle. You can do plug-in, you can do it wirelessly, or you can do battery swapping. A major finding that we
have
had.
a minute to conclude.
Yeah, all right. So the second major finding that we had is please consider the fleet operational pattern as well, not just battery specific considerations when you are picking a charging option. And especially if your commercial fleets are your early adopters, do weigh in their considerations. And if you're planning for buses, route parameters are a critical factor. You possibly need to select routes in such a way that they are for electrification in such a way that you can manage with a optimal battery capacity size. When you're planning, make sure you understand what your vehicle models are, because in India we saw that there are LV and HVEWs, and hence you are not all chargers suit all kind of vehicles. If you are planning for electric two-wheeler fleets, definitely decentralized solutions are the way to go. And then in talking about battery swapping in general, please do factor in the weight of the battery. And swapping works really well for passenger fleets. Whereas if you are thinking about logistic businesses where there is an opportunity window to charge, we might not really need swapping. We can still manage with charging. We do recommend the use of multi-criteria decision-making tool for selection of charging technology. And the final comment that I want to make is that because our vehicles are distinct, for the electric buses as well as the light electric vehicles, which is the two-wheeler and three-wheelers, the charging standards has not been developed. So this gives a huge opportunity to actually design chargers for these vehicles. And this is a huge opportunity for South Asia, wherein these vehicles are going to play a prominent role to make cost-effective, scalable, and homegrown charging solutions, especially in cases where the internationally available standards might not be effective in addressing unique challenges. I hope I'm still within time, Apurva. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you for sharing your research and analysis and your deep insights on different EV charging technologies. I'm sure it will be very useful to the audience here. With that, we have now both the experts having shared their insights and experience. I see a lot of questions emerging in the question answer box, and I would probably now hand it over to Pramod to take us through the question answer session. And please feel free to put in your questions in the chat box, in the question answer box. Probably we'll pick them as per the priority. Pramod, maybe you have a mechanism to address which one should be taken up first. But we promise you, even if we don't answer all the questions today in this webinar, we'll probably find the solutions and get back to you when we send the proceedings of this webinar. So over to you, Pramod, now.
Thank you, Apurva. So as you mentioned, there were a number of questions, and thank you to our speakers and other panelists who have tried to answer a number of the questions in written. So the priority that we have, today's discussion was focused on location assessment and selection of charger types and technologies. So we are going to take up questions related to them first. And if time permits, there are a number of questions related to pricing, economics, utilization factor. So all of these questions will take if time permits today. So looking at the open questions, we have a question from Mr. Siddiq Jubair, and his question is applicable to Rajesh. After implementation of the program, the ESL program that you presented, what are the lessons learned and what are the critical factors to select charging technology and for site selection? Rajesh?
Yeah, so for selecting the site, the two parameters that emerged most critical were the load availability, and secondly, the site should be available for all kind of vehicles. We saw that certain sites, there are a lot of parking vendors who are monitoring them. So they usually what happens is the EVs don't get an easy right of the way. For charging technology, since when we started this assignment, most of the vehicles were DC001 compatible. And right now, most of the vehicles are coming at CCS compatible cars. So the selection is whether you want to go ahead with high capacity chargers or not.
Thank you, Rajesh. We have some questions related to life of battery. So Chandana, this is for you. And the question is, how long will the EV battery last? And how is India looking into disposing of such battery in the long run?
All right, sir. Even within lithium ion, there are different chemistries which actually allows charging at different rates. So if I'm looking at LFP as a technology, that is actually not great for a country like India, wherein we experience a lot of very high temperature as well as humidity during summer, especially when I'm talking in terms of smart charging. As you would actually see, one of the first battery chemistries that came in for cars in India, that actually came at, this could only be charged at 0.3 C rate, which implies that it would take around 2 hours plus to actually fully charge the battery, if I'm talking about charging from a 30% upwards. So whereas if we were to look at chemistries like LTO, which might be a little bit expensive, but that can actually provide charging at a faster rate. In this case, fast charging is quite possible. It's pretty much dependent on what kind of chemistry the manufacturers use. And this is a big question because as you can anticipate, the faster you want to go, the costlier the battery will be. So even though the lithium ion cost is coming down, that is one problem that the manufacturer will have to take a call, which we specifically saw because of the low energy density battery that are used in three-wheelers as well, whereas the cost is a very high consideration for adoption. Talking about a second life of the EV battery, there is a huge chance there. This is especially because even though a battery which might become not great for an EV because it is not performing for a higher standard, I can have other use cases for it. I can use it for the grid application. This can be a grid storage application. This can be a storage application which can fit in very well with the rooftop systems for microgrids and all that. And the second life application for batteries pretty much comes there, and there is a huge opportunity pretty much there for India. But there are some factors that we need to consider. I was also part of a team which was working on that. One major cost that we will incurring when you transform from an EV charging battery to a grid application battery is in repackaging the battery. Which is a huge cost there. So possibly there need to be some amount of standardization on the form factor, on the connectors, and things like that, so that the reconfiguration costs can be quite less. But definitely there's a huge window of opportunity to actually transform the EV batteries for a larger use cases. These batteries could also be deployed with charging stations in future so that the grid impact is less.
So Chandana, another question which is related to charging standard. And the question is, if India is developing a DC charging standard for three-wheelers, which is different from Bharat DC01, do you have any information about whether this standard is currently being formulated?
So in India, DST is actually spearheading all the initiatives for charging standard development. They have already adopted the standards which conform to international standards. This is the type 2 and DC charging and all that has already been adopted. But there are some specific standards that are actually in the advanced stages that we can say. One is on a light electric vehicle charger that can be deployed everywhere. It's quite safe, but quite cheap. This can be put in anywhere. It can be put on a street light or anywhere in front of a kirana shop. That is a basic AC kind of a plug that can be provided for that. And the next, as you mentioned, this is a standard for a DC charger which is being developed, because this comes from the safety perspective as well, that we are trying to develop for that. Apart from this DC charger, we are also developing on standards for chargers that can be put in parking slots. This could be parking slot chargers. It could be either AC or DC. You put in an EV charging box and the vehicle can come in and connect with it. So a lot of standards are under development. These are not standards you actually see in international markets. International market has gone in a very different way. And once the chargers come into this place, especially the chargers for 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers, I can actually see a huge change that is actually going to happen. Some of the provisions I can actually say might pick up from the Bharat DC standard, but the idea is that we do not have a restrictive capacity which is limited at one voltage level, which the Bharat DC has done. It is either 48 or 72, but provide a larger range, because when we researched also at AAA, we saw that even the vehicles could have any kind of battery ranging from 48 to 110. So that's what the standard is trying to address.
Thank you, Chandana. So Rajesh, there are a number of questions related to Spark's experience from the ESL pilot. And if you can turn on your video, I'll read out those questions. And first question is, were there challenges in training for management of charging during implementation?
Yeah, so basically this was the first time that such a large scale rollout of charging stations happened in India. There were different, the learning curve for the management of charges was steep. We found out that even the sometimes dusting at the chargers also led to switching of the charges. So the uptime of the charges was a key challenge. Then we also find out that sometimes people tend to switch off the chargers from the back end, from the back of the charger emergency switch. So all these kind of issues we are still discovering. It's still in the learning phase. The standard operating procedure is still under development basis, whatever we learn new in the market.
So one question is related to battery life. What is the battery life for electric vehicle in India that has been observed?
See, usually the cars coming now in the market do provide a guarantee of around 8 years of the life for the battery. The cars with the DC001 are little not that sophisticated batteries. They do have a life of around 4 years.
So another question related to battery life. In case of fast charging, battery life will deteriorate fast. So how to bring a balance from a cost perspective? That's a question Mr. Manas asked.
What we usually observe is, in fact, this is also observed globally also, that people usually don't charge their vehicles at fast charging station that frequently. Most of the charging happens at night time. It's only at times they need a top up is when they come to charging stations. So yes, you're right that there may be some deterioration in the life of the battery when they charge the batteries at fast charges. But considering the proportion is very low, the effect is negligible.
So another question, it's related to the time required in process and approval. And the question is, apart from the electrical connection, how much time does it take to secure other approvals? We can, give some ballpark estimate.
So what we did as in this study is wherever we found that the approvals are tedious or they may take a lot of time. For instance, at certain sites, there are underground gas pipelines where the approval process may have been a bit tedious. We have tried to deprioritize those sites as maximum as possible. The rest of the approvals didn't take much of the time.
So, Chandana, there is a
Also, I
question
wanted to
related.
add that as a part of the survey, we had a joint it was a joint survey. We had members of land utility, power utility, as well as some other administrators. So those people helped us actually identify what kind of approvals would be required and what are the areas where perhaps least number of approvals would be required.
Thank you, Rajesh. Chandana, there is a question related to pricing mechanism and what type of chargers for three-wheelers in India.
All right. So if you were to go through the 2 and 3-wheeler report for AAA, you might find detailed information. But roughly, how I would put it is a basic charger that you would find in a market, which only has a time control, which is at a very low charge rate that could be as cheap as 4,000 or 5,000. Whereas if you were to look at advanced DC chargers, you are going to look at a scale of 10K to 25K, wherein you have programmable chargers. This based on the application, if you want CCCV capability with high charging advanced management, then it is actually going to be a little expensive. This actually depends on what kind of battery you want to invest to begin with. What we see is there is not much standardization when it comes to the E3W market as such. And it's quite possible because this transition is actually happening from the lead acid to lithium ion technology there. So it's quite up to the person to make a decision on what kind of battery he needs to invest in. And this is always a cost sensitive decision. One point that I wanted to make here is possibly to share an experience. We have presented it in our case studies. When we talked to a person who was operating a logistic fleet, what he said is that initially, even though he invested a lot in the battery, since the chargers were not up to the mark, he had failures with the battery because of the mismatch of the charger voltage and the battery voltage. Then again, they decided to make this investment, even though it became a costlier investment for that client, wherein they switched over to the expensive chargers, which is for the programmable, controllable chargers. That's possibly what I can share quickly on that.
Thanks, Chandana. There is another question that we had received in writing. One of the participants sent it to us at the time of registration, and it's related to home charging. So the question is whether the residential customers need any additional or special charger in order to charge their EV, or can it also be plugged to the normal socket that people generally have in their households?
All right. How I want to put it is that if I am just going to plug in my EV at my residential socket, that is not possible because in India, at least you need an industrial plug top. So the minimum you'll have to set up is to at least connect an industrial plug top. There is no communication and control that is actually happening in this case. We typically tend to call this as mode 1 charging, and this could be something you can have in the initial phases of work. But what we need to remember, this is not a great or a safe practice to charge because there is no isolation between the vehicle and your home as well, and there is no protection mechanism. So what has happened globally is that even though initially this mode 1 kind of a charging has been permitted, later they have switched on to at least mode 2 type of a charging, wherein at least there is a semi continuous communication between the charger and the vehicle, and you can even remotely switch off the charger sometimes, or there is actually an isolation between the home and the vehicle. This is critical because if I'm looking at a two-wheeler, maybe I can take the battery to my home and I can charge it. It is still going to be a 1 or 2 kilowatt hour battery, not much of a problem. I can easily supply it from a 16 ampere plug point. Whereas if I'm looking to buy a Hyundai Kona, which has a 7 kilowatt battery, now this might be a connection that I need for it could be as high as my home connection requirement itself, which is 7 kilowatt charger, whereas my home connection could be 6. So in this case, you need dedicated outlets for home charging, and especially if I'm talking about the controllability perspective, because if the vehicles are going to be charged at the evening peak time itself, wherein we are also using on other appliances, it makes sense to invest a little bit more on the home charger side, at least to bring in an on-off control to it, so that the customer can also save on the bills, whereas the DISCOM can also benefit from managing the peak load. That is how I would put that, sir.
Thank you, Chandana. Rajesh, we had received a few questions in writing that were related to economics of charging station. And I believe the next part of the series will cover in detail the economics, costing, and the financial feasibility. But there is one question related to how do we evaluate the impact of charging stations on electric grid. So when you are doing the site selection at that time, what was the process followed, and what are the other techniques to evaluate the grid impact?
So while doing the survey, we just measured. See, the grid is designed basis the maximum load that can be taken up. So for 15 kilowatt charger, which is DC001, we just checked whether they around 20 kilowatt load availability is there or not. But having said that, once the chargers are live and being operated in real world, we are taking data from the chargers and analyzing the load curve, that how these chargers are getting utilized over time, over day, and over months. And those insights can then go input for the future location assessment part.
So there are few questions related to tariff, and Chandana, you may like to answer those questions. So the question is, how to decide the tariff for charging? Is it at par with residential or commercial tariff? Would you like to,
All right, sir. So actually, there are no guidelines surrounding the how the electric vehicle charging tariff should be determined anywhere. So we are actually in the learning curve. That is where we put it. So we have done a dedicated research on how to design EV charging tariffs at this point. So how we have seen the experience in India is that some people have defined EV as a separate consumer category and then defined tariff for it. Some people have clubbed them under the existing categories. Sometimes it is considered under commercial, sometimes it is considered under residential, and that is how it has been done. So what we have seen is initially, since it's the introductory phases, the regulators have taken an approach wherein for EV charging, they have tried to remove the demand charges, that is for the charging tariff, and mostly it's just charged at a kWh rate. This is a promotional measure that they have taken to promote electric mobility. And when I talk about the residential charging rate, the consideration right now is that for the residential charging, it will be charged at the same rate. This is wherein we will face a problem in future, because almost everywhere, I think in India as well as South Asia, residential tariffs are in block rate, and block rate is designed in such a way that it does not actually promote or incentivize a higher consumption, because if you add an EV, you are going to pay a little bit more on the higher end. To give you an example for Delhi, in Delhi, the residential tariff could be anywhere between 3 to 6 rupees, whereas the EV charging tariff is somewhere in middle, which is a flat 4.5 rupees. So if a Delhi consumer is buying EV, it is quite possible that if he is charging at home, he has to pay 6 rupees or so if he is already at a higher consumption level. So our recommendation for EV charging tariff is that time of use rates should be applied for EV charging tariff. This will also help in managing the EV charging load. And the guideline should be such that, as in we also say that don't keep any demand charges if you are actually offering a TOU tariff. If you want more details, we do have a document in the report, and we can definitely have an offline discussion further on this.
Thanks, Chandana. There are a few questions related to recycling and disposal of battery. So maybe you and Rajesh can, reflect some thoughts around what is currently done for recycling or how to handle the disposal issue. Chandana, would you like to take it, or
Yeah, I can
Rajesh?
definitely-
Maybe.
yeah. Or Rajesh, please step in wherever. I am no way an expert in this field, but what I can say is, since lithium-ion batteries have a lot of electronic components, they are covered under the e-waste notification. In India, we have seen these draft rules that have come up. And as the policy actually says, if I am dealing with electric vehicle batteries, the first consideration that we should try to do is to actually reuse those batteries. Then only you get into the consideration of recycling of the batteries. The policies are actually in place, but from the implementation side of things, if I were to talk about the extended manufacturer responsibility that is applicable for mobile phones, and if I translate that to EVs, what we can see that it is not mandated right now that 100% of the batteries needs to be recycled. Only a limited share of the batteries have been asked to recycle, especially in the mobile industry. Why I am talking about mobile industry is because that is wherein you see a lot of lithium-ion batteries. But I also know that there are a lot of entrepreneurs in India who are specifically working on this recycling angle, so that India can also build in this urban mining capacity of recycling batteries and make manufacture batteries for iron. I would say that we have a long path ahead. We have some good directions to actually go ahead, and I would definitely request Rajesh to step in and share his comments.
In India, the lithium-ion EV market is very nascent. There are less than 1 lakh vehicles right now in India. But having said that, one of the largest fleet is also being owned by EESL. They are now started facing issues of recycling of the batteries, and they are looking at different business models where the second life batteries business models can be explored. But it is still in the learning phase. We have to see how it goes ahead.
Rajesh will take one last question, and this is from Mr. Ugain from Bhutan. And although Vikas has responded to that in writing, but if you can also add to it, what are the initial policy and regulatory measures that a country need to prepare for promotion of electric vehicles?
I think the country needs to have a plan that which all EV category that the country wants to target. For instance, India under FAME 1 policy targeted all segments of the vehicles, but in FAME 2, they have focused only on commercial vehicle segments and two-wheelers, considering that forms a major part of our economy, our vehicular stock. That is one. Secondly, for charging infrastructure, you need to have a clear roadmap that how to go ahead and install chargers. In that sense, Ministry of Power issued guidelines saying that there should be a single charger at least in a 3 kilometer by 3 kilometer grid. This grid size can be reduced over time. And for highways also, they had set a benchmark that at least for every 25 kilometers, we should put up a charging stations. So these steps can help at least in the initial rollout. As and when the market matures, these parameters can be changed.
Thanks a lot, Rajesh. So I think we have answered most of the questions, as Apurva mentioned, for some of the questions that we could not answer today. There is another session planned which will discuss business models, costing, financial, everything in detail. So check out for our updates. With this, I'll pass it on to Monali Dia Hajra, who's a Regional Energy Manager and Clean Energy Specialist at USAID India, for her concluding remarks.
Thank you so much, Pramod, and thank you to all the participants for joining us for this edition of South Asia Energy Series, organized by USAID's South Asia Regional Energy Hub, as well as USAID's Spark program in partnership with AAA. Thank you so much for being so engaging and putting up so many questions. The speakers were kept really busy, responding to so many questions which were put in. So thanks to all the participants for joining in today. We also had great speakers today, both Chandana and Rajesh. You guys did a great job. Apurva set up the context for the webinar, as well as covered the what USAID is doing in this space. Similarly, Satish also set the context and how the EV space landscape has been evolving over these few years, as well as covered some of the programs which AEEE has been doing. Chandana and Rajesh covered quite a bit on what are the considerations for the charging station, and in terms of technology, Chandana covered it. And we had thank you also to Pramod for fielding all those questions and making sure that most of them got answered. Some of them which we didn't were not able to get to, as Pramod mentioned, we will be trying and addressing and sharing it with along with the proceedings. So I would like to thank and congratulate our organizing team from South Asia Regional Energy Hub, Pramod and Ikshita, from USAID Spark Program, Vikas, Saurabh, Rajesh, as well as Kavita, and the AEEE team, led by Satish, Chandana and Nitin, and everybody else who have been working in the background. So please, thank you so much for this well put together webinar. This is the first in the series on electric vehicle, and the second one will soon follow within a month, and sometime it will be organized in the month of April. As mentioned by Pramod, it will go into detail on financial analysis as well as business model. And in addition to our experts from Spark team as well as AEEE, we will also have OEMs, operators, as well as installers. So please do join in. I'm sure you'll find it very useful to go into details about the business models. And initially, as Apurva had mentioned, we will be sending out, the proceeding within a week's time with the recording link, as well as all the presentations which were presented by our two experts today. So with that, I'm really grateful for all of you to join us today, to all the speakers for sharing your experiences and learnings, and to the organizers for the well-conducted webinar. So thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you in the second edition. Information will be shared by the Hub to all the participants who have registered for this event today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Manali. So I'll end the meeting. Okay, Manali. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you.
you, everyone.